we're very excited about our program today because we feel like this is something that each of you can benefit from. Because I know even at MEC, we have to think about what does our leadership look like long term? What does succession look like? What are things that we have to do? And we have a great panel with us, and I'm going to let Jeffrey Webster, who is going to moderate, kind of give every panelist an opportunity to introduce themselves. But we're very excited about having Jeffrey here with us. Now, Jeffrey, I still want to say that he's with Nissan, but he's actually not. He's actually got his own company, his own consulting company, but he's been involved with MEC for a long time. And he's also been involved with making sure that you get the right people in the right place to be successful. So y'all are in very good hands. I'm going to turn it over to Jeffrey, and we really appreciate y'all being here, and we appreciate the panelists being part of this morning.
Thank you, Scott. Good morning. Good morning. Okay, no, they still didn't hear in the back, and I see there's no movement in the back, so I guess Baptists will be Baptists, so we will leave you guys alone. But what we'll do this morning is I think everyone knows what we're going to be discussing this morning, and that's building our bench strength. But before we start our question, before we start our discussion, we'd just like to ask our panelists if they would to just introduce themselves, and then we will get into the questions. Mike, we'll start with you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Farrell. Actually the past director of learning and development for the Yates organization. I was with them for 26 years, been in the construction industry close to 45. I first want to thank MEC for just allowing me to serve on this panel this morning. It's a real honor to be here with a lot of distinguished people and guests, and to be able to talk about something that's real important in my world over the years, and that's learning and development, training our future leaders. I know we're here to talk about bench strength and leadership, but I feel like I need to talk about this just briefly real quick and let you know the importance of why I'm here and the person that put me in this position too. And the Yates organization definitely is on board with leadership and development of the leaders. We all know that leadership starts at the top, and Bill Yates and William Yates show that leadership every day in their organization. But there's a foundation there that really means a lot to this company and to the future leaders of this company, and that's the core values that this company has. I have to say each one because they're very important. The first one is safety. We live in a very high-risk business, very dangerous business, and our future leaders need to understand that. It's important that we maintain safety to be sustainable in this industry, but also to make sure that our workers go home safe every day, same way they came to work that day. The second one is integrity. In our industry, and I'm sure everybody's industry, there's not always a black and white. There's always gray area. There's an analogy that William Yates uses a lot. It's a great one. He says, when you make decisions or your actions you take, if you don't want them to show up in your mother's hometown newspaper, then you probably shouldn't do it. The next one is passion. This is one that the company shows it's real important that leaders understand that they have the passion to lead and lead their company and departments and divisions. Something you can't teach people, but whatever it is you do, you have to show passion in doing that. And the last one is commitment. It goes a long ways to talk about commitment, about accountability. It's important for leaders to understand that as well. We have a strong culture of accountability in the Yates organization. We talk about it, train our people about it. But those are the four things that I felt like I needed to share with you as a foundation for where I work and what's important to the company. So with that, I pass it on.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, good morning. My name is Carmen Kyle, and I'm with Bank 3. It is a small community bank. We are headquartered in Memphis, Tennessee, and I am out of DeSoto County. And our Bank 3's message is talent, tradition, and technology. And the talent is where the leadership part comes in on really bringing the next generation of leaders into the finance community. And that's in a way of we do internships. And it not just sells the finance or the banking side, but it also just sells the culture of who we are as a bank. And I think that's important for all of us in any organization, is to create loyalty and commitment through buy-in. And that is just being committed to what it is that you sell, whatever product, whatever service that you sell. I think it's important that you make those, especially the next generation, understand who you are and what your goals are for the future. And then tradition, our charter is 1910 out of Woodland Mills, Tennessee. And I think that tradition is also important. I'm a history buff, and I think tradition is key because we learn from history. So a lot of things are cyclical, and a lot of things, most things in finance are cyclical. So the more we learn from history, the economics and finance from the past, the better we can make decisions for the future. And technology, oh my goodness. A bank has to stay on top of technology because of, as we all know, there are a lot of individuals behind the scenes that if they would use their talents for good, then we wouldn't have to have so many firewalls, correct? So if they only would use their talent for good. So banks are tasked with being right on top of technology, and we feel that we do that. So, and I do have a passion for mentoring and coaching the next generation. I think that's key for every single person in this room, is that you find that person that you can impact, because it not only impacts their professional world, it impacts their personal life as well. So thank you all for being here.
Hello, I'm Paul Lyon. I'm a Lieutenant Colonel retired, Mississippi Army National Guard. Spent over 40 years serving in the Army and the National Guard. Most of it here in Mississippi. I came back from active duty in 1985 and then went to work for the Mississippi National Guard. And until about 2 years ago, I served in the Guard as a first enlisted, and then I went to OCS and later became an officer and served as an officer in the Guard. Deployed to Iraq 2005, and I'm fortunate enough to have my brigade commander from that deployment, Leon Collins. So I got to be careful what I say, because he's sitting in the audience today, sir. And then later on went to Afghanistan, where I served as a staff officer managing route clearing assets in that country. Followed off my most recent deployment was as a battalion commander to Kuwait in the Middle East, where I commanded Camp Patriot, and was a Sector 4 South commander, and also had troops in about 9 different countries across the Middle East during that deployment. So come back from that, retired. Now I work for the Mississippi National Guard as their outreach director, working with our soldiers and our veterans and their families, making sure we're taking care of their personal needs outside of the military. So the Guard, in our sense, we're hunting young, agile, adaptive young leaders to come in. The Guard has changed. In 1983, it was a much different Guard than what we have in 2023. Back then, we were a reserve force, and now we're an operational force. We're expected to be able to deploy and execute missions overseas and at home, domestic missions, whether it's hurricane response, COVID response. The last thing I did before I retired was start and initiate the COVID response for the Mississippi National Guard cell. So you never know what you're going to be doing in the Guard, so we need young leaders that are willing to come in, step up, and fill that role for us.
Okay, so are you trying to say that counts me out, Paul?
Oh, no, sir. We're enlisted. Meet me right after this.
By a show of hands, if you left your company tomorrow, how many of our companies would be prepared to backfill your position immediately? Show of hands, how many of your companies would be prepared to replace your position tomorrow? That's a few. How many companies would not be able to replace you tomorrow? Okay. So basically, that's what our discussion is today, and I want you to think of it as an analogy of sports teams. If there was a sports team and someone got hurt, or you were like Golden State with Draymond Green being suspended for one game, do you know that there's a person on the bench that you could pull in? I can assure you Steve Kerr just didn't wait until yesterday or today to try to find a replacement for Draymond, but he already had in mind, because of past history, that he needed a person to backfill that position. So that's kind of what we're going to be discussing today. First question to the panel is, why is it necessary for a company to have a strong bench for future leadership? If anyone just want to jump in on that.
Sure. Leaders go first, right? So I'll go first. I think it's really important to have a good succession plan in place. I've been involved in one the last couple of years, and I can tell you it works. In order to maintain sustainability and longevity of the company, you should have a good succession plan in place so that people can take your place. Emergencies come up, people retire, things of that nature, so you need to be prepared. It just only prepares the company. It prepares people that maybe you are directing. If you're a director of a department or a division or a company, having those people and those future leaders prepared and ready to step in at any time is a big asset for the company.
You know, I'd say it's not the bench, but do we have enough of the bench? Two things. So we do have a bench, but we're sometimes struggling finding that talent to bring into the bench to make sure we have those people to come in and step up. The Army is very structured in the way we do that, of course. But what we found in the later years of the military, I commanded an intelligence company, which is very specific in those skill sets that you have to have for that. And sometimes it's very hard to recruit for that bench and make sure you have the right people. And we do have to go outside our organization. We have to go outside of Mississippi, and we have to seek for some of those skill sets out of other locations. So having a good bench is critical, and having the right people and the skill set to come in and take that over is important for us.
Hello? I'll tag on that to say that on a particular position is that you might, it's, in my opinion, it's critical that you have on the positions have very detailed resumes or job descriptions, so that there's going to be some people that you're bringing up as leaders that you're going to be able to identify for a certain area of expertise that they've got strengths in. So you identify their strengths, and then you pull them in that direction of that position, and you can get it very detailed of, this, whether it is multitasking. Some are very high in that, so you find the very best multitasker, and they may be weak in areas, other areas, but you work to strengthen those areas as well.
What have you seen at your companies when you've not had a good bench strength? What have you seen? What are some of the negative effects of not having that in place?
I think in the Yates organization, it puts us in a pretty critical position. If you have a project or a project that you're a large project, and maybe your project manager decides to leave or retire or whatnot, it puts the project in a really difficult position if someone is not ready to step in, take control, and be a leader of that. So that's one negative. We live in a very cyclical business, I guess. People rotate around in our industry, in the construction industry. So people will move. In this generation now and the times we're in, people have a tendency to jump and move quickly. And so we need to be prepared for that. So I think on the positive side of it, if you're prepared for that and you plan for that ahead of time, always plan, then I think that puts you in a good position to recover pretty quick.
I need to just leave it on. In the finance industry, it's for to have an immediate opening is tough because you've got customers out there with expectation because you are dealing with their money. So every industry is going to be a little bit different on the immediate. So in the finance industry, it's critical that you have a very good succession plan and have that strong bench in place.
And without a bench, I mean, if you don't have that right person to step in, especially in the military, it could have catastrophic effects. So we try to make sure that even our younger enlisted and I'm a platoon leader, so I have a platoon sergeant. I want to make sure he's ready and ready to take over if something were to happen, even though he may not have that skill set that he needs for that job at the time. But you keep them ready, and otherwise, if somebody were to leave, or it could really cause problems. So keep your people ready and as far down as you can, down to the lowest level.
When you guys look at the characteristics of a good leader, of a person that you're looking for to fill a position, talk about some of those characteristics that you're looking for when you're putting your succession planning together and when you're kind of looking out to see what the characteristics that would be appealing to your company or to your organization.
So what we really, I mean, what the easy one is competence. You want to have a competent leader, and you can train people and make them competent. Of course, the harder skill to train is character, and do they, maybe they can do the task, but can you trust them in situations when you're not there, especially in the military? I mean, if you're over in I hate to keep using military, but that's what I am. If you're in a country and you have a platoon leader out in a village, you expect him to do the right thing, and he has to do that when you're not there. It's easy to get mad, it's easy to do wrong things, but you have to have a leader that you can trust and has good character that will make the right decisions. So character and competence to me are with the emphasis on character.
To tag on to that, I would say absolutely character and integrity, and along with that, to be able to communicate whether it is a military strategy or a company organizational goals, would be effective communicator. And with that would be also a problem solver. So if you can't communicate effectively, then those that you are leading aren't able to fulfill what you need them to fulfill to meet that goal.
Yeah, I think that's the key word, 2 words, good communicator. I mean, it comes up all the time. When things break down in any situation, it's usually a breakdown of communication. People are not communicating with each other. In the construction industry, it's a fast pace. You got to make decisions quickly. You got to deal with issues that change minute to minute, day to day, and you have to make quick decisions. And I think good decision making is a good characteristic to look for. Somebody that's got a positive attitude, and of course we all know what team players mean. Be a team player, not an individual person, but a team player. And then the other one is things that happen in our industry a lot, and I'm sure in other businesses, is conflict. You got to be able to deal with that. I was talking to someone outside earlier, and they said, how do we deal with that? I mean, as things come up over and over, and it's the younger generation, I say that, but that's something that we need to help our future leaders understand, that they've got to deal with these conflicts, and how they handle that, I think, is real important.
Can any of you talk about specifically the programs that you've set up within your own companies to, number one, identify those potentials, and number 2, to develop them? Not only just to say, okay, this is a person that I want, but what have you done to develop that individual?
So in the finance industry, again, I mentioned in my introduction that internships are vital to what we do. You can weed folks out pretty quick if they come in and don't have a concept of whether it's follow-up or concept of analyzing data or the necessary data to put a deal together. So internships, when they come into our bank, they have a mentor. The day that they walk in the door, they have a mentor. And that mentor this mentor is already prepared. They're already a proven leader in our organization. So they already explain, and this is so important with mentoring, and we'll probably discuss this a little bit later. but is that you eventually, you probably don't need to overwhelm them the first day, but they need to understand the big picture. What is the big picture of the goal of your company? Well, obviously it's to make money, but how do we do that? So how do you get from point A to point B? What does that look like? And you explain the details along the way. You don't just assume that someone knows that. Most of these interns are young in the finance, and so you walk them all the way through, and then you find out what their strengths and weaknesses are. You find out, is their strength in the analytical side? Is there strength in relationship building, which is business development? Is there relationship in administration? What is that relationship that, what is that strength that you can focus on, and then identify those weaknesses? But in an intern, once they have kind of identified what area is their strength, then they move to that next level of internship. And our last 3 interns we have hired and told them even before they graduated from college that they had a job with us. So and two out of the 3 were relationships that were built from people within our bank. It was a personal relationship. They either knew their parents or something along those lines, and they are brought in. You know a little bit of their background, and you know a lot about their work ethic. So I just think that when we are out in the professional world, always have your eyes on that next future generation that you can pour into. And it may not be the industry that you're in, but you know someone that has an internship available and that can mentor them and walk them through that. I think that's key in any organization, and I do think that we do that well at Bank 3.
So I think that's true. Internship programs are a really good way to be able to identify future leaders. We do have a really robust internship program. The success rate on hiring those interns are very high for us. But what's important about that is when interns come on board is to make sure that your current leaders are engaging with them and having those discussions with them, helping them learn about the industry, making them feel comfortable. They like constant feedback. They want feedback all the time. And that's a new way of doing business. We've changed, and things are changing, ever changing. But encourage you to definitely engage into an internship program, get to know them. But the other part of that is ask your current leaders in your organization to go out and recruit and make sure that they find talent and then have them bring them in. But they're just as much a recruiter as they are leaders and building projects and so forth. They're recruiters, and we're developing that in the organization, is helping them understand that your responsibility as a superintendent, project manager, division manager, you need to recruit because that's part of their job now, and that's really important. So, good point.
Yes, sir. And so, you know, the recruiting piece, we actively engage in, of course, in the military, but if we're looking for our young officers, there's kind of 2 ways we bring them in. We bring them in from universities where we have what we call a simultaneous membership program where they can be in college and be in ROTC and then kind of find out what the Guard is like and maybe see what an engineer officer does or somebody that they're interested in being, if that's what they want to do, and do a little mentoring with them there. If that's what they decide, then they can complete and commission into the military. The other way is OCS, and so we take people that are already in the military that have since received their degree and meet the criteria to become an officer, and we send them to OCS. OCS, we were talking earlier, our class started with 169 people and we graduated 32. So we have a high washout rate because we train to the threshold of failure. We want to find out what that point is, and then we want to go past it. So when we do that, we can start identifying people that not only can make decisions, but they can make those decisions under duress and still accomplish the mission. So training to the threshold of failure, sometimes we get, you know, as a unit, I see us sometimes trying to make the gate and just trying to task, condition, and standards is what we call it. So there's a task, And then there's standards, and those are easy to meet, but when you increase the conditions, it becomes increasingly harder to meet that task. So we want to increase those conditions on our young leaders, find out what they're made of, and see who can take it and become a good leader with the Guard.
Very good. Mike, you mentioned something that I think is very important for us to remember, in that when we're talking about doing our succession planning and being a part of that, we need to make sure that this is not put on HR's plate as HR's responsibility. It's not just human resource or HR's responsibility, but it's the entire organization's responsibility. All management and everyone that's involved in the process, we should take ownership of that. As we take a look at our development plan and what we're doing, how do we ensure that the individuals that we have identified get the resources and the things that they need to be fully developed, and we just don't start the program and it drops off? How do we ensure that this program continues and that the individuals that are identified get the resources that they need?
Okay. Well, I can tell you from just experience with the Yates organization, there's a step process. And in the industry, in the construction industry, there's a progression. And you want to make sure that they know what that trajectory is and give them that opportunity to take advantage of the training that's provided at the field level, business level, all the way up, but allow them to be able to be a part of that. Let them know when they come in. That's important from an internship program as well. They want to know what type of training they're going to be provided as their future leaders. What kind of training are you going to provide for us as we move through the company? So it's real important to make sure that you explain that to a new employee, that they have a way and a path to get there, but then at the end, they're not going to just get dropped off. They're going to be given future training, continuous learning and development. That's key, is to continually develop. That's a good key indicator from a good leader too. If somebody doesn't want to continue learning, that's a red flag to me, because everybody should continue to learn and continue to develop themselves as a professional and as a leader.
To tag on to what Mike said, I think that you can put things on paper, and it looks good to say we've got a program in place. But again, I use this word all the time, but you have to have buy-in from the top down, that from the very top, that they are going to impact that intern. So you can write it down, but it takes action. I do think that action means investing. You have to invest in conferences. You have to invest in professional associations. You have to invest in internal coaching. So I think that there's a difference in companies that have that culture versus, and I do believe that there is a sense of loyalty and commitment when you've got a strong program from that is really leads from the top.
Yeah, and I'm talking with Carmen earlier, we're talking about, I think you have to enable. I think the right thing is give them the time to grow. We get so busy, and we're always busy. It's always going to be, there's always more tasks than you can do. So if you don't dedicate that time for them to grow, whether it's professional development, whether it's conferences, whether it's meeting people at these conferences that do like things that they can rely on instead of going to the boss every time, that's very important. So invest the time to allow them to grow would be my recommendation.
How do we also ensure that as we go through this process that DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is a part of our process? How do we ensure that we are identifying and developing leaders from various backgrounds and experiences?
Right off the top, leaders have to practice diversity and inclusion for others below them or others that they work with to fall into that same behavior pattern. It has to be practiced at the very top. And same thing goes with negative behaviors. If leadership, if they practice those negative behaviors, then their subordinates are going to react negatively to fellow employees. So leadership matters. And I do believe that diversity and inclusion starts at the top, and you can't just say it. You have to do it. There is a difference between doing and leading.
So in the construction industry, we're a very diverse company, a very diverse industry. We work with a lot of different nationalities, and we have to make sure that our leaders and future leaders understand the importance of that from a communication standpoint, making sure, getting input, ask them to give you input, ask them what it is, just ask the question. Ask the question, how can we help you? What do we need to do to help you feel like you're part of this team? And as leaders of the company, we don't need to sit back and wait for them to ask us. You need to ask them and be the first one to go out and just talk to them about it, make them feel comfortable, make them feel wanted, and give them those opportunities. Some just need an opportunity, but they don't know how to ask. So you ask the question, and maybe you'll open the door for someone.
Yeah, so in the military, in 1980, I'm gonna tell you how old I am. In 1981, when I went to basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia, I showed up, and I'm just a little Mississippi boy, and I found out there was a whole new world. And so in the military, you are thrown into an environment where you have to succeed. And now I'm here with people from all over the country and all different backgrounds, and we have to learn to work together to accomplish one goal. And there were some struggles through that, of course, as any organization would go through. But we overcame it and really became a very good unit. Kind of taught me right off the bat that you need to make sure as you build your organization, it's about talent, it's about strengths, it's about who can do the job, it's not about anything else. So we want to make sure of that when we're dealing. But you also have to make sure that when there's an issue, you have to address it, and the leadership has to address it. It can't be left valid or not valid. It has to be addressed, and those concerns have to be recognized and worked with so that we make sure we are inclusive and accomplishing our goal together.
Can I add on to that?
Sure, absolutely.
So it's real important, too, that your organization, your company, get involved in programs and projects that involve diversity. I know that we support women in construction. We've got probably more women in construction now than we ever have. So any organization, any program that you can include your company with to help them understand, your employees will see that, and they know that you're serious about it instead of just talking about it. And then recruit. When you're in the recruitment mode, recruit different nationalities. Go out there and reach out to different ones. It just shows stronger strength and leadership in what you want your company to be.
I know that a lot of our companies, we do a great job of developing within, and we hire from within or promote from within, but also there's the times that we have to go outside of the company to bring people in. How do you balance that? And what have you seen as far as the risk and reward for doing it either way?
And so just recently, and I have him here with me, Chris Griffith is one of our new hires that we brought in. So the adjutant general decided he wanted to make a position that could connect with the local community as far as Work for Warriors program, where we hired Chris to come in and help us make connections with businesses so we can take care of our soldiers. He specifically didn't want somebody from inside the organization. He wanted that expertise and talent from outside the organization, somebody that has a different perspective. And in that case, it's a good thing. Of course, you do have to, as I make a hire, I have to make that, there's a lot of circumstances that go into that. I might have somebody that's a little bit more qualified or maybe a little bit has better education background, but I also can't risk 3 months training him about the company when I have somebody that may not be quite as qualified, but that can step in and do the job for me. So there's a lot of risk and reward versus hiring somebody outside the company, but you have to make that decision, what's going to be best for your company in the long term.
I do think that an existing position is tougher when you bring somebody from the outside versus a new position that's created and you bring that fresh perspective from the outside. But I also think that on the previous question, talking about diversity, I think, you have to look at that when you're hiring for a new position and look at your diversity and just, you know what? We need to diversify this position, or whether it's, nationality or male or female or whatever that is, you look at it and think, well, we need that perspective as well. So I think there's again, I'm a list maker, so you look at the goals you're trying to reach on one side, and then you look on the other and just write it down what you're trying to accomplish, and just look at candidates. But again, I think this is key. Y'all are going to hear me say this all the time, but buy-in is critical when you're bringing somebody in from the outside. So you've got to be transparent and explain what that process is, and create buy-in for those that are going to work alongside that individual.
I think there's a lot of positive and negatives for both. From an internal perspective, I think just getting to know your employees and retaining them makes a big difference, and holding on to your employees. They already know what the culture is. They know policies and procedures. They understand the expectations from the company. So from a positive standpoint, that's pretty strong. And that's why it's so important to try to retain, engage your employees so they will stay with you and you can move them up. From an external, time and money. It takes time and it takes money, but on the flip side of that, they can also bring new technology, new ideas to the table, and that's a positive. But on the flip side of that, from a negative, it does take a lot of time and to search and to make sure that you got the right fit for the culture of your company, because that's very, very important to make sure that they're a fit for you in the company. So.
We've talked a lot about the training, the development, but we have not talked about an important piece when you're trying to make sure that you get the right person, as we would call it, in the right seat. And that's the mentoring, and you, Carmen, you mentioned it earlier, the mentoring and the coaching piece. How does that fit into this upbuilding the bench? How do you guys make sure that there's mentoring and coaching along the way as these individuals progress?
Okay, well, this is something that's very warm to me because we do a lot of that in the company. We have programs, we have training programs that bring individuals along. We connect them with a mentor. Someone starts to work with Yates, we put them through a Yates boot camp, what they call boot camp. You're not just hanging off trees or whatnot, but it gives you, as a new employee, the opportunity to understand the culture and what the company's all about. But the big piece of that is to make sure that they have a mentor, somebody that can help them along, somebody that can answer questions when needed and give them good information about the company. That's critical from a mentorship program. We have a real shortage of superintendents in our industry. We've got seasoned superintendents retiring off and leaving with all type of knowledge, and they're walking out the door. We have a program called Superintendent Mentor Protege Program. This is where we're taking young men and women and we're putting them through the program and teaching them, helping them along, because they show the ability to be a superintendent, to build buildings, and it takes years to learn how to do that. So we put them on a course. So it's real important that you have a program in place within your company or organization that addresses that. And it's got to be, like she said, it's got to be buy-in and it's got to be real. It's not just flash in the pan, but something that really means something, and help them, educate them, and develop them so that they can be a leader at some point in time. So mentoring and coaching, one and the same, is very important.
And I think a mentor or coach, I think they're I know they're the catalyst to any, to be able to communicate on the level of the employee, what the organization's needs or things that might be lacking. They also bridge the gap between an employee's aspirations and the organization's goals. So, and here's the thing is, I do think one of the main things a mentor or coach does, they create loyalty. So, you know, if you're this employee on an island, you're not going to be as productive as you are if you've got somebody walking alongside you, whether it's identifying the pitfalls for you to step in. You know, you use somebody else's experience to bring the next leader up. So we all have our past experiences, and we've got to bring that next generation up that says, yeah, I'm going to learn from them. So I think mentoring and coaching is the key as we move forward.
Yeah, absolutely, and we do a lot of mentoring in the military. It's formalized through counseling and all that, but just listening to what you're saying, Carmen, and talking with Carmen and Jeff earlier, actively listen as a mentor, and that you said that earlier was so important. It really struck me that too many times we sit and just talk and try to mentor to them what you know, but what do they really need, and what is it, whether it's personal, that you can help them attain goals that would help the company become better, or goals they have within the company. So active listening is very important, and then being able to help them not only understand the role they have to, and I'll use an example real quick. We're getting ready to go. I was a company commander, and our tag right now, General Bowles, we just finished a big training event, and I'm briefing him. He was my battalion commander, and I said, we did this, we did this, we did this. And he's like, great, great, great. I'm thinking, this is really good. And then he pulls me off and a little bit later and says, Paul, I just got to ask you a question. Did those soldiers enjoy what they did? Are they getting on the bus right now, going home, feeling good about themselves? And he really, he saw something in me. I was task-oriented. I wanted it to happen, but he sees these things, and he listened to me, and he came back with some very, very helpful guidance to me. It's not just a task that they got to complete, but do they feel good about what they do? And how are you making them feel that way? And what is your role in that? So anyway.
I have a personal motto, and I shared it with the guys earlier. I encourage you to take mental note of this. If you don't write it down, then take mental note. But I've told my boys this since they were very young. They're much older now. But listen to learn. You don't just listen to respond. So if we listen to learn what somebody is telling us, rather than already our brain is engaging what we're going to say next, then we've missed the point. We've missed the compassion part of listening to what an employee or a colleague is trying to say to us. So please learn to listen to learn instead of listen to respond.
I just want to add a little bit, because this is something that we run into in our industry a lot, and I referenced the seasoned superintendents leaving. And these are men and women that have been in this industry for years and years. It's got tons of experience. And they love to tell you how much they know. And sometimes they don't listen. So by saying active listening, that is very critical. And I just want to reinforce that. If you're going to be a coach or a mentor, and we talk about that in training, is your brain is thinking about what you're going to say before you hear what the person is telling you. So just make sure that you actively listen. Ask them questions more than you tell them what you know, and you'll be amazed at what you'll get back from them. Because if you don't, they're not going to come to you again. Once they turn that switch off, they're done, because they're going to be afraid to come and ask you questions because you may be critical, or you may be. So positive feedback, constructive criticism, but always reinforced with a positive attitude, and I think that goes a long ways.
I'm going to do this. I'm going to ask one more question, but as I come down, if anyone has a question, we're going to leave kind of the last few minutes of the session open for you to ask questions. But, and if you would, just meet me down here by the front row, and we'll line up and ask questions until our time runs out. But by show of hands, how many of you, your companies have now gone to more virtual work than in the office? Okay. So for the panelists, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with a company that you had employees that were there in the office and you could really check their work or make sure that they were being developed. How now is there a change of what you used to do than what you're doing now?
So for us, you've got quite a few in the mortgage industry that they can work from home. They don't see a lot of individuals face-to-face anyway. But I do think that there needs to be and it can, we've talked about this earlier, Jeff, about the really large organizations from 10, 11,000 to, a company that has 100 or 200 people. Obviously, it's easier with 100 or 200 people than it is the larger ones, but I do believe that there still has to be that month that however the company sets it is, there has to be that interaction, whether it is meet for coffee, whether it is you still have to stay engaged with them personally. To bring them along professionally, you still have to have that compassion and care for the individual. But I on the measuring their results, sometimes that's a little bit harder, but from what we've measured in the finance is that what someone could do in an 8-hour day. Now remember, these are those positions where there's not a lot of relational interaction with a colleague. That's a lot of computer work that we've been able to measure that something that they could do in 8 hours, they now can do in 5. Some of that has to do with them not having people stop by their office or those things. Again, now that particular situation absolutely in no way would work for me. I'm a people person. I have to see your face. So I could never be the type of person that worked from home. But for some people, it absolutely increases their productivity to a level that's just undeniable. You can measure that, especially in the finance industry. It is measurable. So I do think that we have to support both. But again, I think that is knowing your employee. You have to know their strengths and weaknesses. They have to know me that I could never do that and be productive. So, again, them knowing me and my strengths and weaknesses and challenges, that I couldn't do that, they wouldn't expect me to do that. So, and that is, again, getting to know who you work with and what they bring to the table.
I think there's a place for both, but in the construction industry, especially on our projects, it's about relationship building, and it's hard to work virtual on a job site. You're building relationships, your one-on-one contact with your trade partners and your owners and your clients, and it's really, really hard to build those relationships if it's done virtually. But there are places and times for it. During the COVID time, it was a struggle for us because we went Zoom all the way across, and it made it very, very hard to build those relationships without shaking hands and talking across the table and things of that nature that mean a lot to us in our industry. But also there are times we have technology that's coming. Technology is changing every day, right? We have drones and building information modeling. We're modeling projects. Well, you can do a lot of that virtually if you want to do that, but it's nothing better than putting a group of people in a room and hashing out problems in person versus on a screen. So there are times we need it, but there's also a reality to us in our industry that we need that personal interaction to be able to deal and solve problems on a day-to-day basis.
I want to add to that I always say that relationships create commerce. How many of you have sent an email and the tone in the email was not what you intended? Anybody? So if you had spoke to them face to face, it would have been much different, correct? So sometimes that's the perfect example that relationships create commerce. Relationships create repeat business. relationships create loyalty.
And so, and kind of like construction, the military doesn't do much virtual, but I do like the ability now to, as we plan an event, to bring key leaders across the state. Because we're so spread out across Mississippi, we are not in one location. We have armories in just about every county. So when you start planning a large event using Teams or some of those platforms that you can bring everybody together, pull up slides and just have a discussion is great. And it's really I really like where we've gone with that. And I think we're better able to speak and get the message out other than just on paper. We lose some of the context, as you say, when we just try to put an order out on paper. So we've come a long way in those roles. I only say as long as technology is, if you're going to use technology, what is it for and why do you need it? Sometimes we have way too much technology in the military, and I'm not sure why we even have it. And sometimes it causes issues more. Why do we have some of these programs? You need to understand what is it doing for you, how much time you're spending making it work, and is it worth what you're getting out of it? But anyway, that's it.
Yeah, I just want to add a little bit about learning and development. We've found that having that virtual ability with all the projects we have spread out, it does make it a little easier to communicate with employees, give them the opportunity to train, self-paced training, things of that nature. So there's some benefits to it. And technology's taken us to a really nice place in the construction industry. It helps us work more efficiently, more timely, and safe, which is real important to us in our industry. So technology's moving, it changes every day. We can't hardly keep up with it, but we're trying, and I think we do a really good job of that. So invest in the time to understand it, but don't let it overwhelm you, because it does bring benefits to your company and your organization.
If I could add one more thing to that. So one thing I've seen, and I've been around a long time, been around when there was not technology, and we used to produce operations orders, and they were about that big. And what we depended on was a little bit of intent and guidance, and that gave your subordinates a whole lot of leeway to make things happen and use their own initiative. Now we have operations orders that thick, and we take away a lot of the ability for initiative, and they wait to be told. So you got to be very careful. There's a fine balance. You want to give them a lot of information, and you want to tell them, but you also want them to be able to use their initiative to accomplish what your intent is. So.
Very good. I see that no one came up for questions, but that's okay. CC, come on up. And then after this, what I want to do as CC is come in, the class of the most recent leadership class, where are you? If you would stand, give them a hand. Thank you. I do want to say to Scott and to the MEC organization, it is great what you're doing. You are building the bench. This group every year, I can't remember, I went through in 2007. But every year you guys have been building a bench, and you have been working with groups of people to make sure that they get the necessary tools that they need to go back to their organizations and work. So thank you guys for what you're doing. Question?
Hello. We had a fantastic conversation yesterday about building the bench, and what I want to ask you guys is that sometimes you have leaders that may not want to mentor others. They might not want to have a succession plan because they feel that it might deem them as replaceable, or may deal with their relevancy. So what would you say to leaders who will not raise up other leaders because they might feel that it's competition?
All right, so tacking on to what we talked about last night, Cece, is that it's not just, building your bench is not just about succession. It's about looking at a company's goals and looking at maybe your department is expanding, and what does that look like of you building your bench to bring someone on underneath you. So I think that building the bench is absolutely critical for any organization to have success. And so for us, it's really not about the succession plan. It's really about meeting an organization's goals. And aren't we all about growing? Isn't that what we're doing? We are growing commerce. So if we are growing, then we want people to bring in under our wing and for them to learn from us. So, and quite frankly, if we're not leading and we're not mentoring and coaching and all of those that are either underneath us or beside us, and y'all, you got to leave ego at the door. If we're not leading, then we're losing. So I'm pretty passionate about mentoring and coaching programs because I've had people in my professional life that have invested in me, and it's key to MEC, but it's key to our state. So.
I would just say to that too, and so if you use the word I in the military, you're wrong usually. And so if that leader is doing that, he's probably not building trust with his people. He's also probably taking credit, or she is also taking credit for everything, which a leader should never do. You should be giving the credit where it's due to the people that are doing the work. So pretty easy to recognize somebody like that usually, but
It's not a new dynamic. This has been going on for a long, long time. I would probably say in the construction industry, we see that more prevalent in the superintendent ranks. They've been doing it for a long time, and they feel threatened when some young person comes along and they've got the technology that is like 110 miles an hour, and they're trying to keep up, and it's hard for them. And we try to educate them and help them understand that you're wanting this person to be better than you are, and that's a challenge. That's a challenge to help them understand that. But the leaders that I've worked for the last 26 years have made that very clear to everyone in the company that you want to make people that work for you better than you and not feel threatened that they're going to take your job. And by the way, when you hire someone, you want them to be better than you. And that's hard because we think we know it all right, but we don't. And so when you're looking to hire someone, especially interns, and they bring in you all kind of new technology and knowledge, embrace it. And don't be afraid of it. Embrace it, and that'll make you a better leader for sure.
Well, listen, let's thank the panel one more time. What a great morning. Jeffrey, thank you for leading the discussion. We are ready to move next door. We will start actually